Good morning, Bikuto. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Koliswa?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. How's your morning been so far and what have you been up to?
It's been steady. Really much of settling and even imagining how my week is going to unfold from tomorrow. Sundays
Yeah.
sometimes we're meant to rest, but at times we are thinking about the work itself. So trying
Mm.
to have that balance into the
It's not
next.
easy, hey?
It's not. It's really.
Especially with just, one thing I've learned from you, and I take it with me and I tell as many people as I can is, the idea of the rat race that we're in. I
Yeah,
learned this
absolutely.
I learned this from you, the rat race that we're in. You constantly have to go, and especially with the changes that COVID-19 have brought onto us, it's now there's an element of control that has been stripped away from you. It's gone. So
Yeah.
now, who are you in spite of this change? And are you going to confront it? Are you gonna avoid it? Are you gonna,
Yeah.
ignore it?
Yeah.
And you had advised that you believe confronting a change is far better because that gives a platform for growth, you
Exactly.
know. And so, with this red race, I think it's quite important that we are cognizant and that we are conscious of ourselves, conscious of our surroundings, and conscious of the role that you play so that, hey, you don't lose your mind.
Of course. Of
Mental
course.
wellness is important.
I can't stress that enough, Koliswa. It's very
Sure, I can
important.
imagine.
Mm,
Yes,
mm,
yes, yes. So on that note, we're gonna go straight into it. So the theme for this season is getting down to the root, understanding Black mental health, and the topic for our conversation today is the future of wellness in the Black mental health space. So last week we spoke with one of your colleagues, Ms. Brisile, and she spoke about mental illness in the Black community slash Black mental health. Where are we now? And we had a very, very interesting conversation,
mm,
very insightful, and we're talking about essentially in terms of where we are now. It needs to
mm,
be the
mm,
integration of ways that we as Africans used to deal with mental health, with
mm,
our issues in spite of capitalism, in spite
mm,
of our Black trauma.
mm,
How we deal with our mental health, which was
mm,
holistic and community based.
mm,
And also it's about a transition about what mental health is, and
mm,
especially to move forward in the understanding of how we used to do it, what it is now, and what the best way forward is. So it's collaborating, all those things, and true to form, because we are holistic. Our approach to things as Africans is holistic. So the integration and the transition and the way forward, Ms. Priscilla had expressed that she feels essentially that's the bottom line in terms of where we are now. So in terms of the future of wellness, we are going to talk about, for an example, drawing together the points made in the previous topics, right? And
mm,
looking forward towards the future of wellness in the Black and African community.
mm,
How do we take the knowledge and wisdom of our ancestors and bring it into our practices for wellness today? I
mm.
think that's quite important. So, without further ado, please unpack for us, what you think about, the future of wellness in the Black mental health space.
Thank you, Koliswa. Um, you know what? Historical conversations are always important, and I believe that's what you unpacked
Mm,
previously with my colleagues, which is how did we understand mental health in the pre-colonial times, and how do we
mm,
transition to today and integrate, as you said. So for me, I think that we are it's not impossible for us to borrow certain practices during the pre-colonial times to the current times. I just think that we don't foreground African ways of healing enough in Black communities. And I think because of the hegemonic theories from Western theories, we are aware of them and we put them into practice, in fact, as practitioners. However, we do not foreground them enough, be it in academic institutions when you are training a mental health practitioner, for example. We don't foreground Western theories as much as we do African theories, and be able to kind of weave that into practice and bring it out to our Black communities. So for me, it starts at it's how institutionalization works first, because in institutionalizing, there's a lot of knowledge production, right? Especially academic institutions, they are regarded as the hub of knowledge. And we know that with knowledge production, there is power as well, in that whatever knowledge goes where has an element of power driven behind it. It can be power of class, it can be power of positions, authority, right? So what we see is that we've lost the essence, of course, of certain theories or knowledges or past historical narratives that we lost connection with along the way. So for me, it starts with foregrounding in those spaces that produce a knowledge from a place of privileged power too, right? I mean, we do need academic institutions, and we rely on them for growth, knowledge and intellectual thinking, critical thinking, stimulation. But we need to ensure that if we are existing in Africa, if I have to make sense of a problem in a community, I've been able to dig out the root of how we thought of it before, which is in a more Afrocentric way. So it's about knowledge production to start with, and it's about documentation as well. For example, we do know of traditional healing, but perhaps we don't do as much as we do with Western theories in terms of how to make sense of psychological problems or psychological challenges. Now that's problematic, that we are not challenging that enough for it to come automatically. You know, you must actively look for it compared to the available Western theories. So for me, that's where it starts, because with knowledge production, we are also building a culture, right, amongst ourselves, be it as practitioners or building culture in communities, that if we make this particular way of thinking dominant, we are creating an ideology, we are creating a reality. But in fact, realities can be multiple. And one reality in Africa can be different reality for Western ways of thinking or making sense of issues. So following knowledge production, I think even if we are far from academic institutions, it's for us to actively immerse ourselves with how were things done before, right? And like I said, what can we borrow from how things were done? Typically, I always say that it's cliche to mention Ubuntu in terms of a practice in communities, but I do mention it because somewhere it gets lost. You know, as a young generation, sometimes we don't even know how to unpack what it means. You know, because it's not necessarily foregrounded as much as it was. When we think about Ubuntu, yes, there's a debate of literature as to where it originates, right? But my purpose is not necessarily to to be conclusive about that literature. But I'm simply saying, if it was seen as a dominant culture, despite its origins, it was a dominant culture amongst which Africans adopted. I don't see why we should not familiarize ourselves much more consciously with regards to the practices of it. And it's not, I always say that bringing the subject of Ubuntu is not a moralistic conversation. It's a practice conversation. And how that fits into mental health. And we believe that there are certain things that build up to mental health challenges in our Black communities, right? But if they are integrated or well weaved into our communities, things like compassion of your neighbor, things like compassion of your colleague, things like knowing that someone else is struggling, and someone being able to say I'm struggling is based on the grounds of the dynamics in how we relate in communities, right? So you find that I often use the examples of high walls, that with high walls you can go days on end without seeing your neighbor, right? And you don't know if your neighbor is okay or not. And if we look culturally of the essence of community with the principles of Ubuntu, they kind of prevent such incidents. And if we think about mental health, depression as an example, there is a presenting problem of isolation already as a form of a symptom, right? But if now you are existing in a community and you are so isolated, no one knows that you might be struggling because of the structure of that kind of community. No one might know that you're struggling, you need help, and what kind of help and level of support can be offered to you, right? But if we do a sense of community, it can at least counter that symptom of feeling isolated. Yes, it's not something that happens overnight, but it's a created opportunity should you feel like reaching out.
Wow. You have raised, so many important points, and I like how the points interlinked, which takes us back to what Priscilla was saying last week about, the integration aspect of how we used to do things, and the transitional aspect of, in light of how we used to do things, what is it now, and collaborating the two of those aspects into our way forward. And I want to touch on a few things. For an example, the power of knowledge, the potential power knowledge has to produce knowledge or to create knowledge. And also I want to touch on the consciousness aspect. I want to touch on how to act, or how we can actively immerse ourselves. But what I want to talk about right now is a very important point, and we spoke about relating in terms of communities, right? And that's insofar as I was talking to a friend earlier on, my mentor, in fact, and he was talking about how, in Ghana, Ghana versus South Africa, because I'm South African, he's Ghanaian, and he was talking about socialism and how definitely there's a cultural barrier between, contextually Ghanaians and South Africans, but generally it's to say nation to nation there are cultural barriers. And now he was telling me that back in school, he, in terms of the subjects, grassroots level, they used to do subjects relating to being socialized and proper. They used to study proper theories and learn these soft skills, that they are, say, as South Africans, we have something called life orientation, of which has got nothing to do with, life in the broader sense of things, to be quite frank. We have physical training, but for them, they had something to do with socialism and social studies, and it relates to how to deal with people, how to treat people, and it definitely translates into how they carry themselves. I speak about him in particular and his family. It translates into how they carry themselves versus how I carry myself, and what I've learned from him in the capacity of the knowledge he was subjected to, his environment growing up, and how it has impacted his upbringing, impacted his viewpoint on life, on people, and especially of himself. And I think that, in terms of the way forward, personally, we need to be able to have less barriers that allow us to relate to our fellow intercontinental communities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely, whether it's in the mental health space, but just as a way of communication, as a way of learning from each other. I think that definitely relating in terms of communities will assist us greatly, as Africans, because it will touch on the knowledge, the power of the knowledge that we spoke about, or you spoke about rather, how to produce knowledge, how to create. So in that, by doing that, by relating with different communities, different countries, I think we'll be touching on that aspect of, we want to be in a space where we create the modus operandus, for example, as a millennial, our approach to mental health, our approach to, consciousness. And you also touched on how, we've lost the essence of certain narratives and all that. And perhaps some narratives don't work anymore, but there hasn't been a conversation of, okay, this works, that doesn't work. This is okay, that's not acceptable, but all of that comes with communication, and it comes with, being in contact with other, communities, and like you're saying, creating opportunities. Very, very important.
Absolutely, Xoliswa. And I think when you mention some kind of tensions or discrepancies between, for example, yourself as a South African or someone maybe coming from Nigeria or Zimbabwe, we've seen and witnessed xenophobic attacks, right? And if we think about mental health, we have what we call trauma, or we have what we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, if it's translated quite clinically. So if we think about traumatic events, or even thinking of mental health on a national level, we often say, so South Africa, for example, is a traumatized nation because of past experiences of apartheid and the brutality endured for the longest time. So if we think about what you are saying with regards to educating ourselves a little bit more, we would understand that if we for example, are familiar with literature by Steve Biko, would be able to embrace our fellow Africans outside South Africa. We'd be able to embrace, in fact, if we will be able to rely on each other for support. And that speaks a lot to mental health. How so? Because we're not in constant attacks that leave us with a lot of woundedness in society, and that leave us with a lot of, like I said, tension or hatred amongst each other. And of course, if we do not resolve or interject, we also have what we call intergenerational trauma, right? Where the trauma that is observed by our kids or our children, especially in Africa, like you say, intercontinental as well, it's something that will be passed out. If a child is observing a xenophobic attack, the trauma itself will translate to the next generation if we don't intervene. So if we look at Black consciousness, it's quite psychological literature by Steve Biko, and it speaks a lot about breaking those barriers. And I believe, like you're saying, it's about how we socialize as well. And borrowing from that, those principles are very important for me to know that when I see my Zimbabwean brother or sister, I know what that means in terms of the psyche of Blackness. Right. So if going back to the actively producing or foregrounding such knowledge, I would be confident that it would alleviate some of these readily attacks towards each other, and therefore alleviate trauma, and therefore protecting the mental health in Black communities or in African communities.
Sure. I like that a lot, and it reminds me of what Wesley said last week, and she touched on the barrier to access, you understand, and we were speaking specifically in the context of finances, in terms of affording a psychologist and all that. But with your conversation today, I would describe the barrier of entry or the access. I would contextualize it to the barrier of access to knowledge. Because now if we never have the chance to access that knowledge, we will never have the chance to create an opportunity to exercise that power. And it's such a disaster when knowledge remains potential power, because if potential power is not realized, it's wasted. So I think more than anything going forward, it is quite critical, extremely critical, that we understand as Africans, the power, the potential power that knowledge has, and the potential power that being conscious about, creating opportunity, and especially relating in terms of other communities, what effect that such will have, on your overall synergy, your well-being, your spirit, notwithstanding the mental wellness aspect. But now going back to the first topic about what the history of Black mental health was, Kundedi was touching on our approach to mental health as Africans was holistic. It's a spiritual thing, it's a community thing. It's not this or that, it's the whole thing. If someone is sick in the family and you want to consult a traditional healer or a doctor, they look at everything and anyone, and it's not isolated, it's not secretive, you understand, because it's nothing to be ashamed of. You have the support, you have your love from your community, and definitely I think that is the biggest barrier, the fact of we don't have knowledge. So if you don't have knowledge, you won't even have the chance to know if you have a financial constraint, because you are still got the aspect of you don't even have you don't even have the knowledge, and I think perhaps some of us don't realize actually how easy it is, and how not a taboo it should be, and how as Africans, this is not a secret, it's nothing to be ashamed of. If you're not okay, you're not okay, and you have a brother, you have a sister, and we need to identify the real core enemy, and it was never us, and we need to just now redefine the social construct, and create dialogues and narratives that fit into the landscape of life now, and what wellness and mental wellness, how we want to define it as Africans, our own way.
And I think extending on the access aspect of it, as you said, Oliswa, is that when I say that we need to borrow from the past in terms of practices, if we think about, for example, maybe there's someone who's not feeling well, or they've been feeling heavy, or emotionally they're not well, psychologically. And of course, this has a kind of like a ripple effect at times on relationships, on your occupational life, and so forth, right? So it doesn't only stay with it. We don't understand mental health challenges as challenges that stay with the individual. They can also influence other aspects of the individuals externally. So if we think about the lack of access and the socioeconomic issues in our community, the way we understand mental health can, like I said, can be quite, at times it's quite hegemonic towards Western theories. But without disputing that, or mainstream way of understanding depression or anxiety or schizophrenia, we don't discredit that. In fact, we apply it and we see the purpose, and we are able to provide support from that understanding and practices. But we're trying to say, like I said, it's foregrounding the other part. So if there are socioeconomic difficulties at times, what might be already in existence in our local community might be something that works for us, right? So, for example, some people would be comfortable to consult a traditional healer. We are looking at accessibility and possibly affordability, right? And some people can rely on spiritual or religious healing, that is accessing that the healing at church, or seeing someone who helps them to connect spiritually in whichever form that has an impact for them. But what I think the point that I'm trying to make is that we need to speak about those alternative ways of healing and normalizing them to the effect of if it's something that works for your presenting emotional or psychological challenges, then it would be something that can be embraced. And if it's accessible, we don't have to put pressure for you to access a mental health facility in order for you to feel healed, right? That's what we're simply trying to say, that if what we're doing on the left, we might as well do on the right, which is embracing a multicultural dimension towards accessibility and alternative ways of healing.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I really, really like that a lot. You know, what I'm taking from, everything that you're saying, it's that, whichever, direction we feel as a community is based to go in, certainly going forward in the most sustainable way, in the most powerful way that includes everyone, no matter what class you're in, your position, your authority. It's quite important, that we make it our own journey, but we must make sure that we are quite intentional about it if we ever stand a chance to, change the narrative, if we ever have the chance to be a conscious people, collectively. Last week, Priscilla was saying that, there's a long ways to go in terms of, mental health, but certainly, it's up to us, and it's up to how we apply ourselves. If we want to be passive, if you want to be active in terms of your application as an individual in the social construct, it's really up to you. But now, I think if moving forward, or rather in moving forward, normalizing, certain things is quite, beneficial. But the most important thing that I'm drawing is that there is hope for, African mental health, and there is hope for Black, mental, wellness, and that we are really an amazing group of people as Africans, as an amazing continent. We are really, really amazing. our forefathers and our foremothers have, laid a very important foundation. They've really laid the basics down. Globally, they've paved the way. I mean, even the westernized approach to mental wellness or psychology, has a lot of African golden threads. In fact, I would go insofar as the basis of their approaches, and their diagnosis, stems from, Africa. So now we are a great nation, as it can be proven in that. And I'm choosing to look at the glass half full because there is a half empty perspective in that capitalism has played a role. We have black trauma, we have African trauma, we have generational traumas that we inherit. So it's just a multi-layer of challenges. But again, that's the glass half empty. So in the perspective of the glass half full, in spite of the challenges, we are a great nation, and certainly as a collection, if we are intentional about relating to each other and breaking the barriers of entry and accessibility to each other, and then using who we are and what we know as a hub of information. I think until such that time that such is normalized, we won't potentially find solutions, because the solutions are in ourselves and not out there in the world.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that part that they are within ourselves, because, like I said, that some things are there, but it is the consciousness around them, and conscientizing each other around them. And with regards to hope, I absolutely believe that there's hope, because if we think about the discourse around decolonization, I think it has opened opportunities yet again to think critically about who we are, or who we were, and how we would like to move, right? So the conversations about what transformation looks like, or decolonization looks like, and inclusivity looks like, I do believe there is hope. I mean, it might not be something that we live through, but starting or rerouting ourselves differently allows opportunity for us to ultimately implement. Because talking, of course, has to lead somewhere. It has to translate into action. And I think us talking is a start, and us becoming comfortable, in fact, is a start. For example, if the recent event at for example, Zimbabwe, USA, there was quite a solidarity. For example, with death at the hands of the police, and also the brutality in Zimbabwe during the recent time, there was quite a lot of unity with rejecting such incidents. And for me, that speaks volumes about how we are trying to reclaim our dignity, and how we're trying to reclaim our humanity, which is at the essence of solidarity, which we knew from the culture of Ubuntu. Solidarity did help in terms of knowing that we have each other, and support structure. So support structure was not quite much at a nuclear family, for example, relying only on mom, dad, and siblings. It was relying on granny, and relying on umama somewhere in the neighborhood to go. So I do think that those small practices might appear quite simplistic, but they do have an impact on our mental processing of events, around us. So definitely when it comes to hope, I do think that the rise of decolonization, reimagining certain institutional structures, oppressive systems, be it by gender, class, race, I do believe that having a voice at least is quite important. And in psychology, we have a term that we call catharsis, or finding something cathartic, from a place of the more we talk, at times we are healing. The more we talk about these experiences, there is a tension, there's a release of tension. And having that platform to talk, for me and you to talk as we are sitting like this, it speaks volumes in terms of a catharsis, a release of tension, as a traumatized nation and continent.
I love that. I love that. I've definitely taken note of, what you've mentioned, and perhaps it's a platform for an indaba or a conference we can host to actually have a constructive conversation, a dialogue, about, normalizing some of these things about now what does decolonization look like, and now we need to integrate all these things. Doesn't matter your class, your position, your authority, your race, just to have a cathartic platform. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yes, that's correct.
Cathartic. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I've learned something today. Of releasing, tension. I mean, that is definitely goals to have such an inclusive space where we can just talk, and it doesn't take anything from us. Instead, it adds on. And again, I like what you spoke about. We might not be able to live in that reality, giving away that we can, decolonize, what certain things look like, and redefine them, and especially release tension. But on that note, my lady, thank you so much for, your insights. This marks, the conclusion of, where we come from in terms of the history of Black mental health, in terms of, where we are now, in terms of Black mental health, in terms of, where we are now with mental illness in the Black community, and especially the future of wellness in the Black mental health space. So the future looks bright. And thank you again for your time. Thank you again for your insights. We really, really, really learned an immense amount of knowledge, from you guys, from you ladies at the Rivasadi, Mental Health Associates. Thank you so much for the work that you guys do, for being accessible, for, being a representative of your communities and upholding community mental health. There's really such a need for you guys, and at the same time, you guys are so scarce, but that comes with decolonizing what mental health looks like, decolonizing what certain things look like, and releasing this tension, deconstructing certain perspectives, and getting to a point where we are so powerful due to this knowledge, and we can create and produce what we want, and be a conscious people, and be a conscious African continent. So thank you for your time, Ms. Pikito.
Thank you so much, Xoliswa. I think let's keep doing the work. It's important. It might not seem like it, but it really is. Consciousness is very important. I think that years later, as a Black person, when you read Steve Biko, it has a huge impact, in terms of how you're able to embrace yourself. So talks of this nature, platforms of this nature will definitely influence our outlook, or the younger generation's outlook in life, and how to have that black love that
Yes.
we often refer to. And as long as you
Yes.
are able to embrace yourself and your blackness, you're able to embrace the other.
Thank you so much. So, on that note, my lady, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Same time, same place next week.
Thank you. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Thetha. Keep well.
Bye.
Bye.